This is Jesse Zuretti from Daath, and you are watching Richard Metal Fan.
Hey, what's up, guys? Episode 260 something of Richard Melfan interviews, calling from Zoom, and I'm here with Jesse Zuretti from Doth and also Binary Code. So how are you doing today, Jesse?
I'm doing great, man. That's 200 plus episodes. That's pretty insane. I didn't realize you did so many episodes. That's awesome.
Yeah, I've been doing this since almost 4 years now.
Wow,
Yeah,
that's awesome.
and I've pretty much have like every other member of Doth on here, and you're like the last
Oh,
member I needed.
oh, cool. You've had everybody: David, Krim, Raphael, Al.
Yeah,
Don.
everybody.
Cool, awesome.
Buddy.
Well, hey, save the best for last. I'm just kidding.
It's all good, man. So pretty much the format is I want to talk about like your musical history and sort of do a rundown of your discography, but take me back to young Jesse's already. So kind of growing up, what were the first bands that got you into metal? What made you want to start playing guitar and do like the synthesizers and all that good stuff?
Yeah, so I'm 30. I'm going to be 38 in a couple of days. So I've been listening to music for a long time, and I think my early days with metal in particular was probably soundtracks in the 90s were pretty cool. They were like Nine Inch Nails, Filter, White Zombie, Pantera, stuff like that could be on a soundtrack. Like The Crow, for example, or Tales from the Crypt, Demon Knight. They had just amazing soundtracks. I actually think the first time I heard a metal band would technically be Cannibal Corpse in the Ace Ventura Pet Detective movie.
Yeah, it's funny if I actually had interviewed David a few about last week, and he pretty much mentioned the same thing, how he got into
Oh, really?
Cannibal Corpse, and that's the same, and that's pretty much how it was with me. That movie's iconic. It's like
Oh,
one of
yeah.
my all-time favorite movies.
Yeah. It's incredible. Yeah, but just Cannibal Corpse, like Ace Ventura going up on stage and, just doing death growls and then jumping into the crowd is,
Yeah, and that little weird dance he was doing, I thought that
yep,
was
of course.
hilarious.
Yeah, he's doing like his hump dance too. Um, but yeah, it immediately I would say like hearing Danny Elfman's music definitely sparked an interest in weird, like Tim Burton's movies and Danny Elfman's music just really kind of captivated me as a very young kid. And I loved horror early on, and metal in the 90s for me was like very dangerous sounding. So I gravitated towards metal bands because the ones taking the risks, like Cannibal Corpse, for example, they were really pushing the boundaries. And I was like listening to or looking at something I shouldn't have been. And it was a really cool feeling back in those days. And then I kind of went through a new metal phase too. Mudvayne LD50 was like my want to play instrument record.
Yes,
Basically,
the
it's like, oh, I
Berber
want to.
Dang.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Berber Dang. Um, I read about them in a Rolling Stone magazine in like maybe like before LD50 came out, we'll call it. And I was anticipating it, and then I got to hear one of the songs when they released a music video, and then I was instantly just like, this is my new favorite band ever. I was into Slipknot a little bit before that.
Yeah, it feels like
But
almost everybody in Doth is a Slipknot fan. Like I know like
yeah,
Sean and Krim and
same.
everybody.
Yep, huge Slipknot fan. In fact, I still have my vinyl record of the self-titled album, which I bought when it came out.
Yeah, yeah.
I think it's worth like $1,400.
Yeah, dude. And the cool thing was, speaking of it, I actually have it in my collection. Because I remember a few years ago, I got like a big like a tax refund, and I saw on eBay they had like an original press of the first album. It was $600. It came signed with all 9 members.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, I
Especially
have
some of
it.
the people who passed away. That's amazing to have
Yeah,
that.
I think, but this was before the same year that Joey had passed away, but it was before
Oh
he
boy.
did. So if it would have happened afterwards, it would have cost even more.
Oh yeah, totally.
Sorry.
Yeah, it had like a slime green version
Yeah,
of the
which that's the
self-titled.
same one I have. I can
Yeah.
actually show it. Hold on one sec.
Oh, that's so cool. Yeah, let me see it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's got this bad boy right here.
Yep.
Here, signed by all 9 members. I don't
Oh,
know if I could
dude,
see
that's
it.
one of the coolest things I've seen in a while. Vinyl related. That's incredible.
Yeah, it gets how old, because look at like the
Yeah, yeah.
corner right here.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, let me see. Let me see that on the inside. Let me see the vinyl itself.
Sure, I got it right here.
Yep, same exact one, dude.
Yeah. Yeah, so
Amazing.
yeah, it's
I love that.
very rare I have like OG press. I have like some OG Iron Maidens
Oh,
vinyls. I
cool.
have like or like Black Sabbath, Priest, Megadeth, like so many.
All the good stuff. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, that Slipknot record was huge on me too. I mean, it just immediately made me want more crazy, intense, high intensity metal.
Yeah, I kind of wish I would have seen them on this album cycle. Too bad I was only like 5 years old when this album came
Yeah.
out.
Yeah.
Why couldn't I have been born 10 years earlier?
Oh, I know, right? I did get to see them when they toured Iowa. Um, I saw them on Ozfest that year, which was incredible. It was like them, Linkin Park, Marilyn
Wow.
Manson,
That sounds like a
Mudvayne.
weird lineup back then.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it was very heavy, believe it or not. Taproot played, which was cool too. But like Mudvayne played this small stage outside in front of like 500 people, which is crazy to think about. Slipknot filled the place to the brim and annihilated. That was pretty cool seeing them. But yeah, so Mudvayne made me want to play an instrument effectively. And then I got into Dillinger Escape Plan around the same time as well, and that also made me really want to just get going on an instrument too. So I picked up guitar, and that was kind of the impetus. So that was 2002, and then I started a band with a friend in 2002 when I moved back to New Jersey, and they were actually based in New York. I couldn't even drive yet, and things didn't work out with that band. And then I decided to start my band, Binary Code, which I did when I was technically 17. It was right before I turned 18 in 2004. So it's been a long ride.
Yeah. And this year does mark 20 years since the formation of Binary Code. Got to think
Yeah,
about it, Jesse. 20 years of Binary Code. Like, did you think
crazy.
that Binary Code would be around for 20
I did.
years?
I did. Yeah. Because like the truth of the matter is, I never thought there was an alternative. Honestly, like I never looked at Binary Code as like it was a band only. It was just like an idea of like music being made constantly. So like however whatever means necessary to do that. And as long as I felt like making music, which at that point I couldn't imagine myself doing anything else. So as long as I'm alive, that there's always going to be music coming from there probably. So yeah, 20 years. It's really crazy to think that, honestly. It's hard. It doesn't feel like it's been that long.
Yeah, and you guys are pretty much like unsigned independent, so it's just quite nuts. It's very rare for, especially there's like newer bands now, like bands like Shadow of Intent and Angel Maker, that are unsigned, and they're pretty much been blowing up. And I can also throw in my
Yeah.
boys and Left to Suffer from Atlanta. I don't know,
Oh yeah.
they've definitely been they don't even have a label, and they're still like just blowing up, and it's just like from word of mouth. So how does it feel? So what's sort of like the difference between like being like with an unsigned project versus, of course, Daath now signed to Metal Blade. So what's sort of like
Yeah.
the difference between being signed and versus doing things independently?
That's a good question. And there's like different varying levels of the necessity of different things, right? Like if your band is already finding success unsigned, why bring a label into the picture? But if your band is unsigned and you want to level up and you've kind of reached a maximum of like what you can do for the band on your own, then it's time to bring a label into things. I think we often look at record labels like it's because it's kind of true, but like it's this hard thing to achieve. And really, like if you really want to get signed to a label and that's what your goal is, then you can probably do it. But you just have to be very label focused at heart with what you're doing. It's really hard to get signed to a label if you ignore a lot of the principles of what makes a band appealing to a record label, especially today. They look at a lot of things very analytically. It's like getting into a college, it's like, what's your GPA? How long did you maintain that GPA? Did you do extracurriculars, all that stuff? Like that's what a record label wants to see. Um, but I think right now in 2024, do you need a record label? Probably not.
Yeah, it
Uh,
really just depends on the band, really.
yeah, absolutely. I have friends who are in bands that are incredibly successful independently who sign with huge record labels, and their contract deals don't sound like metal record contract deals. They sound like, pop music record label deals. They're huge. So I think in today's day and age, like it really needs to be worth it to an artist to sign to a record label, because of the financial loss can be tremendous with a record label. You could be losing a lot of opportunities to make income. And I think in 2024, it is possible for people to make a living off of metal. And if they can avoid doling out some of that money to other people, they should. But it's a lot of work. You have to make it a business. It's got to be your life. Everything has to go into it. And you got to be very smart about it.
Yeah.
So
Well said, well said. But tell me about making the debut Binary Code album, Suspension of Disbelief. And I know this year does mark the 15-year anniversary of that. So, what was sort of like the thought process going into making the debut full-length Binary Code album?
So that one was a mixture of, we did a demo in 2008, and it was maybe like 5 songs from that demo made it, and then a single in between that, and then we wrote a bunch of other ones. My drummer Omar and I at the time, my old drummer, we just wrote that record, and it just kind of popped out of us really easily. He and I had a really good vocabulary together, and we jammed very easily. So we just wrote a bunch of stuff, and we recorded it with a friend of ours at the time for free, which was kind of a learning process for everybody. And we had our friend Kevin from Backroom Studios. He actually used to be in Dillinger Escape Plan as a guitar player. He mixed it, and Metal Sucks put it out. They're really good friends of ours at the time. They invested a lot into us, Ben Umanov and Matt Goldenberg. Um, they just, were hugely invested in us as people. We put a lot of heart and soul into our live performance, and they were invested in that element of us. And yeah, we put the record out, and it was hugely received, which is crazy to me to think. Like I don't know how how we would do today, with the way things are today, the expectations people have. But back in those days in 2009, it was like we couldn't get under an 8 out of 10. It was crazy. And I actually, like, looking back, I'm like, I feel like people were being a little too generous. Like, I would have been a little more critical if it were me, but at the time, maybe it sounded good
Has
for the
that
time that
debut
it was.
charm?
Yeah, yeah, totally. Yeah, because we put out the Priest EP after that, which was much tighter and, like, more polished, and like had like more precision to it, and it was like similarly received, but you could definitely feel that people were still kind of like lusting after the debut.
Yeah.
But it was a fun process, man. Like, it felt like science. Like, what are we doing? How's this coming out? Like, it's just a lot of mixing stuff.
Yeah. But of course, like I mentioned before, this year does mark 15 years of suspension of disbelief. So, do you have like a certain feeling about it now as opposed to when you first put it out?
There's a lot of it that I think is still very cool, and there's a lot of it that's very much a product of the time that because I've never really written from a specific place. It's always just been, what am I into at the time, and I want to write like that. And back in those days, we were like very Gojira centric, and I loved Gojira a lot, and I think maybe it came through in ways that I really liked, and then in some other ways it didn't quite work out. It was a lot of like jammy riff kind of vibes to it
Yeah,
too.
the heaviest
We
matter.
wrote, yeah, and well, here's the thing too is, it's unusual these days, I think, for people to write music together in a room, and that's how that record was written. It was written with my drummer and I playing in a room together and coming up with the songs together. So that seems like an unusual concept in this day and age. I kind of miss that, but I also really like the very procedural approach that we have now today, which is like, sitting down and being calculated about things. I think better songs are written structurally, and that's probably the greatest fault of that record. But it's a product of its time, and there's a lot of fun and a lot of experimental nature to it that I really appreciated at the time, and I still do.
Yeah. And then going into the next release, which is the pre-CP from 2010. So tell me about like that EP. What was sort of like the thought process going into that? Because considering it was only like 3 songs.
Yeah, it was just a quick EP that we put out because we had toured with Revocation, and uh, getting ready to tour with Revocation, I started writing songs already. In fact, believe it or not, some of the songs that I started writing before we went on tour with Revocation in 2010, we ended up on Moon's Blood. The song Unexist, for example, I started writing that around the time that we toured with Revocation in 2010. So um, I started kind of upping the technicality. Everything was like acrobatics to me at that time. Like, everything was like your forearms would be, filled with blood, and your veins would be pulsating from like the amount of like stuff that you had to do. It was very challenging, very heavy, very aggressive, and like nonstop. Um, and in order to counterbalance that a little bit, I wrote a track called Ocean of Light, which was more like Cult of Luna style, to kind of, just bring things down a notch. I've always been like inherently too, when I listen back to earlier stuff, I get like very bored with my own stuff very quickly. So in order to kind of cure that, I don't write the same style one song after the other. So everything's always got to change. So it's like track one might be one way, track two is going to be completely opposite direction. And that's how I've always been and probably will continue to be. And I think that EP was just like a quick burst of like, here's a couple of real sick fast songs, and here's one crazy slow one, and an 8-bit version of it, which was weird. I don't know why I did that, but everybody seemed to like it.
Yeah. Yeah. I also love
Yeah.
hearing like 8-bit versions of songs.
Yeah. We're planning to do that with Daath, by the way.
Ooh, I can't wait to hear that. Yeah,
Yeah.
because I remember hearing, because I love like 8-bit music, especially because if you remember back in the if you remember the Sega Game Gear.
Oh yeah. Love that thing.
Yeah,
Sonic.
because I used to play Sonic, some of those Sonic, because I didn't personally have a Game Gear, but I had a PlayStation 2 where they had like a mega collection, which is like a compilation of like all the
Yeah.
old Genesis and Game Gear games on there.
Totally.
So I
Yep.
played that, and I don't know, just something about those 8-bit tunes are really just really
So good.
techy and catchy.
Yeah, I actually like literally last night just beat Sonic Mania. My fiance Sydney and I were playing it, and the soundtrack is incredible for it. So if you haven't played that or heard that soundtrack,
Yeah.
T. Lopez did the soundtrack. He's actually from New Jersey. Um, he wrote one of the best soundtracks that I've ever heard. It's
Really.
in the style of the old school Sonic, but the writing is like level 1000. It's
Yeah.
unbelievable.
And it's funny because I know that there's like some like somebody made like the sound bits from like those Sonic Genesis games and like the theme song to Family Guy. I think there's like a video of that online. I thought it was pretty interesting.
That's cool.
It sounds like it could be in Sonic.
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, people, as soon as you hear something, you start building a vocabulary. So there's going to be somebody out there who's going to, start making stuff with that inspiration and that sound, which is nowadays we can hear everything that's out there. Everybody's putting out music and we can all find it. So you can find so much now. It's incredible.
Yeah, and I'm a huge Sonic fan. It's pretty much one of my favorite
So good.
video game characters of all time. I'm looking forward to the new movie at the end of the year.
Oh yeah, cool. Who did you always play as Sonic, or did you ever switch it up and play as Knuckles or
I
Shadow?
I played like every character, and I'm looking
Okay.
forward to Shadow the Hedgehog. And they got Keanu Reeves voicing
Yeah.
Shadow. That should be interesting.
That'll be really interesting. I agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Sonic is just such a fun game. It's like part pinball, part platformer.
yeah.
It's kind
They
of a
actually
perfect
made like
game.
like a pinball game of Sonic called
Yeah.
Spinball.
Yeah, Spinball. I remember that. Yeah, I've got to try that at some point. I mean, the Sonic games are very hard, in my opinion. Like they
Yeah.
get harder and harder and harder. I'm a huge fan of it.
Yeah, but talking about like Priest, the EP, I thought it was interesting because you made like a reissue in August of 2010 where each jewel case has been spray painted by hand using a hand cut stenciled band logo and has been signed by all four of you. And it's only limited to 25 copies, which is each numbered by hand in either green or purple, which should be like a collector's item at this point.
Yeah. Oh, dude, I can't believe you know about that. That's so cool. Yeah,
You could thank Metal
literally just
Archives for
made
that
them
shit.
together. I forgot about Metal Archives. Yeah, we that was kind of like we were just trying to like add value to people who were buying music at the time. Not a lot of people were buying music in the early 2000s into the 2010s. Like it was a lull in people's interest in buying physical copies of stuff. You'd see bands who now can probably sell out 2,000-3,000 plus venues. Back in those days, were selling like maybe 600 records in their first week, and it was pretty crazy back in those days. So we just wanted to add value, and it went over really well. We sold all of them very quickly, and if not, actually we had to make more. We did another run, and it was just a lot of fun. We all signed them. Brett, who's in Revocation, as a bass now, he signed them. Our old singer Mike did, and Omar and I, and we just had fun, just doing something different. Basically, is what we wanted to do.
Yeah.
Especially since we're doing it on our own.
Yeah. And then I know in 2015 you did a remastered of a Priest. So what made you guys decide to like do a remastered of that?
It was an unmastered version. I actually technically engineered the Priest EP, so it was like our first time with me at the helm, kind of spearheading the whole thing. And I didn't know what the process was for mastering. We just threw like a level. I didn't know what I was doing. This is like the days before Easy Drummer and Neural DSP and stuff. So we had to mic the drums and like do this whole thing. And I didn't know what I was doing. So when we put it out, it was like very much like, oh, I threw a limiter on it and that was it. And later on in life, I was like, I should do something more to this. So I added more dynamics to it and made it a bit bigger sounding. And I think it helped out a lot for people who wanted to listen to it. I need to get those up on Spotify at some point. I get a lot of people who ask me about those.
Yeah. And then next up is Moon's Blood. But I thought that was a great great follow up full length to Suspension of Disbelief, because usually with the debut full length album you have your entire life to write, and there's a lot of hype with the first album. But I know you also had like the EPs in between. But when it came to making Moon's Blood, did you feel pressure to follow up Suspension of Disbelief?
No, because the lineup changed drastically for that, and our approach to writing also changed a lot too. So um, there was a lot of time off in between in terms of writing. We started recording Moon's Blood in 2013 with Ale, which we can get to later, obviously. But there wasn't like a lot of pressure, honestly. I just felt like I had to change which direction I was going, and I still wanted to keep a lot of the technicality of what I was doing, but also start writing songs that felt more from a place of where I was coming from musically, which I've always been a huge fan of. Very ambient kind of, Meshuggah inspired stuff without it being too djenty. That wasn't ever like the goal. There was no like, oh, like let's be a djent band. It was just like, this is what I wanted to do. Give me a 7-string already. I started on 7-string with binary code. So, well, technically, I started right after our first demo that we did, but 7-string was always something that I really liked at the time, and bringing it back into the picture just opened up a whole new world of possibilities for us. And I wrote everything in advance and then would give it to my drummer, and then he would either record what I did or write his new ideas down for his drumming. And yeah, and then we got Oded, who could sing, which was new for us as well. Like having a singer who could actually sing melodically and not scream was a huge game changer for us. And yeah, that's when we decided, with what we were. By the way, just to backpedal a little bit, there was always like some talks to record labels, but we were always just really comfortable working with the dudes at Metal Sucks, especially Ben Umanov. He was like literally like our godfather. He was always looking out for us, our guardian angel, like keeping an eye on us, making sure we're doing the right things. And he never really saw like a deep desire to push too hard if things weren't working out, or if like we needed to do certain things. He was like, just keep doing what you're doing and keep busy. And Moon's Blood was definitely a result of like staying busy and still putting music out and staying true to our sound. And I'm still pretty happy with that record. I like it. I mean, it was very experimental. I wasn't I didn't have a sound whittled down, again, as usual. Like I'm kind of all over the place, and so is the record. But AL definitely helped us step that record up so high and made me a better musician. 110%. My perspective of writing changed completely.
Yeah. And of course with the with that, because I know I'm kind of backtracking a little bit. When you started like with binary code, did you start like playing with, especially like playing shows around like Jersey and New York and stuff? Did you like started like playing outside of like New York and stuff for the first
Oh
time,
yeah.
or was it still just like locally?
Yeah. Actually, believe it or not, my first show I ever played in my life was at CBGB. So like the first time I ever played in front of other people was at the most famous metal rock punk venue in the entire world. And I had no idea how good I had it at the time, because it was just across the water from us in New Jersey. Um, but we had a demo we recorded with this guy named Jason D'Azuzia, who like works with Imagine Dragons now, which is insane. But back in those days, he worked on like My Chemical Romance and Coheed and Cambria. Number 12 Looks Like You. I saved up all my money, working at Sam Ash as a door greeter in high school, and saved all my money to go record a demo with him. We put out the one song, and we got show offers like immediately. It was crazy. Like we just got kind of like all these cool offers to play with Ion Dissonance and Psyopus and all these cool bands. And it just kind of it picked up pretty quickly. There wasn't a lot of bands in New Jersey, let alone that I could find, that were playing like what we were doing, which was very weird. Between the Buried and Me was like the closest thing to like what we were doing at the time. And it got a lot of interest right away, and we got very lucky. And just, we recorded with Eric Rattan
Yeah.
maybe like, I don't know, a year after putting out our first track, which was crazy. We did like a short EP with him. We went all the way down to Florida. I was 17 years old. It was crazy.
Wow, I never knew you worked with them.
Yeah, that demo is actually very cool. I have a hard time finding it myself sometimes, but it's like very like Soilwork meets X-Toll meets Suffocation. It's the weirdest blend of music that I've definitely recorded with the band. But yeah, we recorded with him. We also recorded with Steve Austin from Today Is the Day. He worked on like Lamb of God's early stuff. And and we worked with a guy, Jesse Cannon, who AL talks to quite a bit. Jesse Cannon is he was a great producer, but now he's like a force to reckon with in terms of marketing. He really knows his stuff with that, so he's been doing a lot of stuff with that. But I think he worked with like Limp Bizkit and The Cure and stuff like that. I've never cared about anything else other than music, so I always worked to save my money specifically to record or play shows or do those things. So and naturally we did shows all over the place. We played all over Creation in the Northeast. I think the first time we played outside of, I would say, like as far as maybe Florida or something like that, was maybe in 2008, I believe. Yeah, we've always been doing stuff as much as we can. That was always the advice we got back in the days: go play.
Yeah, did you ever like play like Atlanta back in the day at like the Masquerade?
Not until we didn't play the Masquerade until 2016 with Leprous, actually.
Oh wow.
Yeah, but I think we played Atlanta in 2010 though.
Yeah.
I can't really remember, but I'm pretty sure we did.
Yeah, because if you remember like the old Masquerade, like back in the day, when bands like to like load in their stuff up at the Heaven stage, they always have like a little elevator thing on a rope that would like come down and down.
Oh,
And people would load it up, and then people would, I think, they would press it, and it would just like rise up to the top to
cool.
for bands to like load in their shit.
I had no idea. No, we played at one that was like, I think it was the Masquerade. It had to have been. It was with Leprous in 2016. I can't remember exactly where it was, but
Because
I'm
I
pretty
know it
sure
was that year I think it was like near the end of 2016 they actually moved to the new location down in Underground.
Okay, yeah, this would have been October of 2016.
Yeah, so it was still at the old one. They didn't move until like a month later.
Gotcha. Okay, yeah. Yeah, I don't remember much about it, to be honest with you. Everything is like a blur at this point. I feel like the pandemic like completely erased my memory.
Yeah. Yeah, but then speaking of course, that bullshit virus that I refuse to name. During that time, you sort of released the latest Binary Code album, Memento Mori. So how was that recording process like with of course the pandemic? Sort of like of course I know it kind of like fucked everything up with
Oh God.
the music industry. So did like the pandemic at all sort of like influence sort of like the sound of the album?
No, I wrote that record in 2017, and it was actually finished in 2017. We didn't put it out until 2020. We literally put that record out. We hired a PR firm at like the end of 2019, like right before the pandemic, and we'd known the dude for a while, and we actually checked in with him around February or so, and we're like, should we really put this out in May? Like, it feels like it's a really bad idea with the way things are going. And then March hits, and then the pandemic's like completely spiraling out of control, and we're like, are we sure we should be putting this out? And they were like, no, it'll be fine. And we put it out in May, which is literally the worst part of the pandemic like ever. There was no worse time, honestly, for people with their jobs and with uncertainties. Everybody was terrified they were going to die from this thing. Um, so we put out our record literally at the worst time humanly possible, despite our insistencies on maybe pushing it back. And I'm definitely like a little spiteful about it, to be honest with you. Like, I'm not happy with the guys who encouraged us to still put it out. I feel like they were really thinking about themselves and not thinking about us, which was a shame, because our intention was to donate all of the money to suicide prevention, and they didn't seem to really care about that at all. So I'll never work with them again. And it's a real shame. I'm probably going to hold on to that for a while, because I think that was an incredibly selfish thing of them to do. But the process of that record was, I wrote everything myself, and I did all the pre-production myself, and we re-recorded it as a band, as a second pre-production album. Like, we did live drums, like we went through the whole process again, which gave us the ability to like really forensically pick the whole thing apart, make it better. And everybody kind of got to get their DNA involved in the whole thing. And then we recorded it in September of 2017 with a guy named Aaron Smith, who's from the band Seven Horns, Seven Eyes, which I still think is one of the most underrated metal bands out there. Aaron Smith is incredibly talented. His production skills are still ahead of its time, in my opinion. I listen to that record right now against some of the top heavy hitter producers of today, and I hear a production style that just completely smashes everybody else. Like, it's all biased aside, just from a scientific perspective, the guy's production is absolutely on level 1000. So that process was very different, honestly, because Aaron actually really participated as a producer. We showed up with a third draft of a record, and he still broke it down so much with us about like, oh, let's try this riff like this, let's invert this chord, let's try a different chord here, let's do this. Like, it was unbelievable, and the way that the record came out is definitely a result of his work with that. It's the best thing that I've written, honestly, on my own for metal, that I've actually been a part of in terms of band stuff before Daath. Like, it's the best thing that I've done for sure.
Right.
I actually want to re-release it with an instrumental version.
Yeah. Because and one thing I like is on those I sought to spare, you actually had a guest solo from Jeff Loomis,
Yeah.
formerly of Arch Enemy. Me.
Yep.
So how did he end up doing a guest solo on the album, and what was it like working with him?
Yeah, so Aaron Smith is based in just outside of Seattle, where Jeff is from, and they've worked together a bunch because Aaron's like kind of the top dude in the area at the time, and I think Aaron was working on the mix, and Jeff just like came by, and I was like, Jeff's over there now while you're working on our stuff. He's like, yeah. I was like, tell him to throw down a solo, and he literally just like pulled out a Strat and like started shredding. And Aaron sent me a video of it, and I was like, oh my god, this is like his first time playing on this. It was incredible. I still have the video. His solo that he pulled out like immediately was incredible, and then when he tracked the final one, it was like 1,500 times better. And like, it's one of my favorite Loomis solos. Like, I know that I'm biased, but I would say that one and the solo that he did on the Daath album are two of his best solos, frankly. Pretty incredible. And Loomis is one of the nicest guys ever. He's such a genuinely nice human being. I really like, he's such a nice guy.
Yeah. And of course, like, it's been like now now pretty much almost 4 years since Memento Mori. Have you started working on a new Binary Code album? Like, what's the status with that, if you're allowed to say?
No new binary code planned right now. I do want to try and focus on getting a vinyl release of Memento Mori at some point. Binary code is definitely a labor of love, so I can't sacrifice. I make music for a living, so I'm a composer full time, and it's a very hectic schedule for me throughout the year into the next year, and I'm really grateful for that. But it doesn't really leave a lot of room for personal projects. I can only really work on stuff that has I can see something that has intrinsic value immediately. And binary code is a labor of love. I can't expect it to ever blow up and be the next big thing. I know what it is, and when I have time, I'll probably write something again. We actually talked about doing like a reimagined style EP of like taking some of the songs from that album and doing like acoustic instrument versions of it. And I think that's still on the table, because especially at this point, I feel like compositionally I could really like elevate the quality of some of the stuff. So that's a possibility, but nothing's planned this year. It probably won't happen until next year.
All right. And then I know you also do some session work, because I know in 2022 you actually contributed to some keyboards and orchestrations on Amorphos's album Halo. So how'd you end up working with them?
Jens Bogren hit me up. I met him at URM's summit in October or November of 2019 in Vegas. Met him, AL was like, you should go to this, it'd be really cool. So I went, and Jens and I met, and he hit me up. And of course I said yes. I was amorphous at that point, and also like to work with Jens would have been incredible. So, and he told me who all was involved in it. He told me Francesco from Flesh God would be involved. Used from he's worked on a bunch of power metal records. He does like epic choir orchestrations. He's incredible. Just the cast then was involved in it was incredible. Those guys are so nice too. Like I talk to those guys once in a while, and they're just such nice guys, and they're legends. Like, it's incredible that like I got to work on something like that. So it was kind of the beginning of me being like, oh, maybe I should work on bands, albums. That'd be a cool way to stay connected with the metal scene, since I'm focusing on a composing career.
Right. And then I know the same year, 2022, you actually joined up with Daath. So how'd you get to know like AL and Sean and everybody?
So, AL's been a friend of mine since 2013. He's stayed at my house when we were recording the record back in the day when we were doing Moon's Blood. Like, AL and I became friends, and really good friends. And, we've always just remained in touch and always talked. I've been on the podcast a bunch of times before Daath was reformed, and AL and I just text and talk all the time. At one point he just said like, yeah, dude, I'm thinking about bringing Daath back. And I remember thinking to myself, I'm like, yeah, all right, dude, sure. Because there's no way he would have had time, in my opinion. I was like, there's no way he'll have time to do this. and he actually like started sending me demos of like older stuff that wasn't used by Daath. And I was like, yeah, this is cool, dude. Maybe we should write something new. It'd be cooler. So originally, you know, he was going to work with a, he had a different perspective in mind of what he wanted to do. And I was just like, hey, dude, like if you need me to work on this, like let me know. Cause he knew that I worked in composing, you know, I was working with Marvel at the time. He knew that, but he didn't know like really what I was doing at the time. Not a lot of people did, honestly. I didn't really post a lot of my orchestrations and stuff publicly. And at one point, he was just like throwing his hands up in the air about somebody being involved. And I was like, well, let me give it a shot, because he was going to have me just do synths and that's it. And I sent him back what became No Rest, No End, and he was just like, dude, this is insane. Like, I'm definitely like stoked on this. And then he showed it to Sean, and Sean was very stoked on it. And sure enough, you know, we got 3 tracks together, and you know, Krim joined up and was on board, and then we got David was on board, and sure enough, we were ready to like, you know, get into the position of like, okay, who are we going to have involved? And then we got Mark Holcomb involved, and Mick Gordon, and Pair from Scar Symmetry, and who else? Oh, we got Spiro Ducias. You know, he was, you know, basically brand new to the scene for shredding guitar. And Raphael's been somebody who I've just admired for a long time. And I remember Ale and I were talking about another guitar soloist, and I was like, yeah, dude, hit up Raphael, who, as you know, obviously joined the band. Yeah, and then we went recorded guitars with John Douglas in Atlanta, and Ale went out and mixed it with the ends, and the rest is history from there. You know, it was record label hunting at that point.
Yeah. And then of course you got working with Metal Blade Records, and you put out the album that came out today, The Deceivers, which I've heard and is absolutely amazing. So how was the writing and recording process like for it being was your first record with the band?
Well, you know, I've been a fan. I've known of Daath for a very long time. I've actually known of Daath dating back to when I recorded with Eric Rutan in 2005. Daath hadn't publicly announced that they were signed to Roadrunner yet, and I had actually heard their music. This producer James Murphy, I'm sure you know who James Murphy
Yeah,
is, right?
I've interviewed him,
Oh, cool.
about a week or two ago.
He's brilliant, amazing guy. I didn't like know him super well, but we had a phone call, and he was like, yeah, dude, I'm working with this band, I'm going to send you some stuff. And like iTunes scrambled the name of the track, so I didn't know who it was, and I listened to him. I was like, this is some of the coolest music I've ever heard. It was so cool. It was the first Daath album. And then I heard Daath and was like, oh, that's the band that James Murphy sent me. That's so cool. So then you fast forward to 2013, I become friends with Al and record with him. And then you fast forward again. So I've watched the evolution of Daath kind of go from them being like one of the most underrated metal bands, in my opinion, at the time, to what we decided to do with this. And I remember Al saying, we are going to go crazy on this. We're going to go as far as humanly possible with this. And it was a very big challenge for all of us, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, and with this was that, and when you joined up with Daath, were you like kind of like listening to like the other albums being like self-titled Conceiver versus Hinderers and Need of Futility and be like, I want to do this, or did you have like your like free range to like bring like your own kind of like style into Daath?
Well, Al, you know, still maintained his position as like the main songwriter. So like we could come up with ideas and send them his way, and he would integrate it into like tracks that he had in mind. But I think inherently the DNA of Daath would have been there all along because Al was there. So no matter what we did, Al's sound was going to be there, and his sound is very much what Daath always was. um, so I think what's cool about Al and I is we have a very similar vocabulary when it comes to bands. We like a lot of the same stuff, especially on the weirder, more classical and Baroque side. We both like a lot of the same things, and we were able to really, he had no setbacks or nothing holding him back for this stuff. So when he was like, I have this idea for this part, he knew that he could do it, and that like we'd all be able to bring it to where he wanted it to go. I think maybe like earlier stuff was a product of its time, but now there's like so little limitations on what you can do on a record. So we just said yes to everything and wrote as crazily as we could. I actually remember at one point I was on an airplane and I was flying back from somewhere, and I had a Daath riff idea in my head. I had no instrument with me. I didn't write anything down. I got home and I tracked the idea and I sent it to him. I don't remember which song it became, honestly. I think it might have been Deserving of the Grave. I can't remember. Let me look. I have the album right here. Yeah, it would be Deserving of the Grave. Yeah, I just sent him the idea, and then he like took that idea and just formed it into, he just took it and ran with it. He doesn't get enough credit for being an incredible writer. I think he deserves a lot more credit for that. He's got a very unique mind for what he hears and where it's going to go.
Yeah. And of course, like Daath is a mixture of like like death metal, groove metal, melodic death metal, even some industrial like kind of metal parts. So kind of like with you and like everybody else in the band, does like everybody like listen to like different styles of music, and how do you try to like make it so that way it kind of blends in within the sound of Daath?
I think we all do have very different backgrounds, but we all have a lot in common with one another as well. I know Raphael's like into jazz fusion and like really cool kind of shreddy guitar stuff. I'm also into that stuff too. I think David's also into that. I know Krim and I are huge Gojira fans. We've been like lifelong Gojira fans. John is like, in my opinion, like the true essence of a metal singer. Like he was born to be a metal singer, and he loves the stuff that we all like too, which is great. AL's like very picky and particular about metal, which makes for great songwriting. And then when you kind of combine that, like we all appreciate a lot of the same stuff. I know David's also like really into bass as an instrument, as a lead instrument. So he's into a lot of like the shreddy bass player stuff, but he's also really into like post metal and like really heavy, kind of metal doom stuff. As am I. I think we're like a really diverse bunch of people. Honestly, I think and Ale in particular has to work with so many different varieties of producers and bands with URM and Riff Hard that it's kind of hard for him to, just listen to one thing. So we're all into everything. That's the cool thing. We're a very diverse group of dudes, and I actually really like that. If it was too narrow, I wouldn't have enjoyed it. Probably, I don't think anybody in our band would have.
Right. And so what would you say like the whole like songwriting process is like for the Deceivers? Do like you guys have like complete songs, or do you just have like the riffs and you just like jam the shit out of them? Or how does the whole like songwriting work being like there is like six of you?
Well, Raphael more than likely just hears the song and then has it down already because he's a complete machine. He's inhuman. So Raphael, it's for him, his process. I couldn't even begin to tell you what he does because he's so good. Um, I know on Krim's side, like he'll get tracks with some MIDI ideas in mind, but then he'll add his own thing to it and kind of take it over and send us, his drum MIDI back because he'll play it live on an electronic kit. Sean worked very diligently with I can't remember Andrew's last name right now. I'm having a brain fart. It's not because he's an incredible producer. I'm so tired and had such a long week. He worked with Andrew, we'll call him for now. And he wrote a lot of the lyrics and the patterns with Andrew. Oh, Andrew Wade, sorry.
Yeah.
So he worked with Andrew Wade, and they worked on the lyrics and the vocal patterns together. And which they came out amazing. They're so catchy and so good, and I love that. As a matter of fact, actually, Andrew at one point sent me some notes for some of my orchestrations in the brass. He was like, "Hey, what if you like did this grouping to have a harmony like this?" I was like, "Oh, yeah, that's actually a great idea." So we did it. It was kind of a roundabout, we just kind of passed stuff off to one another. To be honest with you, David's bass playing was one of the highlights for me. Like listening back, like some of the stuff he came up with was incredible. It was way beyond what we had written down. We wrote very minimalistic stuff. The orchestration process is very different though. It's different than like sitting down with a guitar and writing a guitar riff. It's like, how do I think about brass and woodwinds and all these different instruments? So that's like a whole other beast. It's very, we have orchestration videos and like I'm breaking down how the orchestra works. Ale and I break those things down, and they're totally worth, if anybody watching or listening cares to check that stuff out. Like we break down hex unending. I think it just came out today actually through Metal Injection. So that whole process is there.
Yeah. And I know you mentioned that you also do like composing, especially like video games and stuff. Do any of like your favorite like video games play into like Daath's work or influence you as a musician? If so, which ones?
That's a great question. Ale and I actually talked about doing a cover of Castlevania music at some point with Daath. Ale and I definitely both like some of the same soundtracks from video game stuff. I'm obviously, he's not like super into video games. Like he played games as a kid probably, but he hasn't really had a lot of time to get into them. I, on the other hand, am in a household of video game nerddom. My fiance works in the video game world. She's actually orchestrating for the soundtrack I'm working on with Riot. So I live in this like all-consuming composer, household right now. So I wouldn't say that like I forwardly try to inject video game writing into it, but I definitely think that there's some influence in some ways tonally. I think the video game soundtracks we like are inspired by composers that Ale and I like. Um, Very specifically, like I think Scarlatti would be a good example, and Bach for sure. I like the Castlevania stuff is just very Baroque sounding, so I think that those influences might just be shared in a lot of ways.
Yeah. And of course, this with the new album, Deceivers, it's the first album with on Metal Blade Records. So, how has the relationship been like working with Metal Blade Records with Brian Slagle and the crew?
Oh, they're great. Brian is amazing. I mean, he's a legend. He's like the nicest guy too. Um, Ryan Williams, who's our point of contact there, has been incredibly nice and very supportive. The whole team there is incredible. Yeah, I've had friends signed to Metal Blade for over a decade. I've known somebody who's been signed to the label, and everybody's had good things to say about Metal Blade. And we were really excited to give them a shot because Daath has been signed to Century Media and Roadrunner, so like it's kind of we've historically there's kind of like the opportunity to know which label is going to work for us, and Ale really wanted to work with a label that was very artist forward and like concerned about like developing artists release. And like despite Daath being not a new band, it was going to be work to bring it back into the limelight, and Metal Blade has been great with it. They're just very communicative and amenable. And we also Ben Umanov, who I told you managed Binary Code for a long time, he's been working with Daath as well, and he works with Rivers of Nile, and he's got a great relationship with Metal Blade. So we have a really good team on our hands, and there's probably no better place for us right at the moment.
Yeah. And of course, like this is the first album with a new lineup. So being as now like 2/3 of Doth live in the US, like you from Texas, Sean in Atlanta, David in Massachusetts, and I think Ale lives in Wisconsin. Of course, like Krim
Yeah.
and Raph live in Austria. How does that sort of like affect like the dynamic and the chemistry within Doth, being as everybody's like in different parts of the world?
Even we have a group chat, a group Discord server, and even though we're like not close to one another, we feel pretty dang close, honestly. Like there's a real good bond there for sure. Everybody's just really supportive and communicative with one another, and I kind of look at it like everybody who's in Doth is like the super passionate guy from their band that they're in. So I feel like because we're all very similar like that, we're all very like we have the same style of communication and affirmation, and just going through all the processes of just making sure everybody's comfortable and like happy with everything is it's very diplomatic, and we all get along great. It's pretty incredible since most of us haven't met in person. It's pretty nuts.
Yeah. Yeah, and how do you like work past like differences? Have you never get into like arguments like I want this part on this album or so far? Or-
No, I mean, there's been moments where we have to kind of like discuss, I guess, preferences is the best way to put it. Like for example, when we were working on art, I was I was just telling I was like, hey man, like if you're bringing Goth back, like maybe a good way to like revive something and to show that there's changes to change a lot of aspects that includes the artwork. And we went through a lot of like art ideas that we had, and Adrian Baxter was actually one of the first people I thought of, actually the guy who did the artwork for us. So it's just been really easy. Al is just very like open to hearing what everybody has to say. It's very diplomatic. There's no like we know that Al does everything in the band. He's very much the leader, and he does
the
the hard
brains.
work. Yeah, he's the brains. But he's very diplomatic. He like shares the band in a lot of ways. So there's really been none of that stuff. None of us would have been interested if there was going to be that kind of drama. You know what I mean? None of us need that in our lives right now. Everybody's doing great with their personal lives, especially musically. All of us, Krim's got Septic Flesh. Raphael's got his band. Everybody's got something. So
Yeah.
we don't really necessarily need to be doing this. We have to want to do that. And if there's band drama, none of us are into it.
Yeah, I feel like like all six of you just pretty much have like your head on your shoulders. Like there's no ego, no drama, bullshit, nothing.
Absolutely. I mean, the guys in my band have every right to be egotistical, and they're not, which is incredible. I mean, like David's like one of the best bass players I know. He's a professor of bass. Krim is seriously like, aside from being in the band with him, I've loved his drumming for as long as YouTube has mattered to me,
Yeah,
right? Like I've been
same.
watching.
Because I
Yeah,
remember seeing his cover of a Slipknot's Eyeless.
Slipknot,
That was fucking, and that's how I discovered him, and that's like one of his most viewed videos.
absolutely.
Has like over 5 million views, which is nuts.
I semi was like praying, like, oh, I hope Krim gets into Slipknot, like recently, but I knew like Eloy Casagrande was on the table too.
Yeah, which of
I
course
always
we
thought
already
he would have
knew
been
for a
great.
while,
Yep.
and then they announced. I was like, yeah, we already knew.
Yeah. I just, Krim would have been a perfect drummer for them, especially with like his record, his track record of doing incredible covers that were so good for its time, like so ahead of its time. Everybody's just a killer in the band, like everybody's, just really should have a bigger head on their shoulders than they do, but everybody's super humble and just, I don't know, really good group of dudes to work with, to be honest with you. It's pretty incredible.
Yeah, and I know like right before the album came but out to Deceivers, I know you also did like some cover songs. You did like the Death's the Philosopher and Where the Slime Live by Morbid Angel. I loved those covers. So how was it like doing like cover songs?
Uh, so that's all AL's brainchild. He just thought like it'd be really cool to pay tribute to bands that influence all of us, and he picked great tracks because we all loved those tracks. It was a lot of fun because the tracks got to be mixed by Dave Otero and Christian Donaldson. Both of them are heavy hitters. Christian actually technically was like a URM mix winner. They had like one of those mix contests. He crushed it. He plays in Cryptopsy, as I think most people would probably know. And then Dave Otero is like one of my favorite producers in America. And I also just love him as a person. I've worked with him on a couple of records as well. So it's just really cool to be involved with tracks that like had a lot of deep meaning to all of us. Like we're all Death fans. We're all Morbid Angel fans. And it was just cool to be able to pay tribute. And also to have Dave from Revocation on the Morbid Angel track was a no-brainer because I know that those guys are really into the really filthy, nasty, sludgy death metal stuff. And then Dan for Ice Nine Kills is such a wacky guitar player, and he just absolutely annihilated it.
Yeah. And I know like also kind of like talking about like your approach to the keyboards, because I know the keyboard's a very melodic instrument. Man,
Mhm.
so when it comes to like working with your keyboard parts, do you need to hear what the other instruments are doing to lay down your parts, or do you usually have like a synth part written and the rest of the band can write according to that?
No, it's been very much like at the post production stage in a lot of ways. It's really because it's such a time consuming element of the process. It's very time consuming compared to like writing guitar riffs and writing drums and all that kind of stuff. I mean, they both like take a lot of work, but composing is like a very specific thing, especially if you want to make it sound real. Um, it's a really elongated process. It takes a long time, and it's got to happen when everything is set in stone and set in place. So it's really like right before they go out to do final like mixing and all that stuff takes place is basically when everything is just about ready. So it's a lot of work.
All right. And kind of one more thing I want to talk about. Of course, with the release of the Deceivers now is there like any tours lined up? Like, what's the status with some live shows with Daath? Because I'm ready to see you all play. Like, you deserve my money.
Um, I'm gonna leave you hanging on that one.
All right, you'll tell me when I turn off the recorder.
Or maybe I won't. Maybe it'll be surprising to you when you find out. But
Yeah,
yeah,
next day,
no
Daath
comment.
headlining show in Atlanta.
Yeah, yeah, we're gonna play in your backyard.
Yeah, or
That's
play
our
play
first plan.
somebody's living room or upstairs bathroom.
Yep, that sounds about right. Yeah, I'll leave that one hanging for now.
Awesome. So thank you, Jesse, for this interview. It's great
My
to be able to
pleasure.
chat with you, and it's great that I've now have all 6 members of Daath on my show. It's just with the release of Deceivers, it's just anything else with Daath or even binary code that you would like to if you're allowed to say.
Yeah, no, but I mean, please give the record a shot if you're looking for something new, but you're also looking for something super familiar. I think my proudest element of Daath right now is that it reminds me of the music that got metal started in a lot of ways, but it also reminds me of where metal's going. So it takes a lot of risks and it pushes the quality standards to new heights, in my opinion. I listen to a lot of metal music, and when I listen to Daath, I hear something that's like very mature, but also very forward thinking. So give it a shot. If you like it, buy it. That would be really cool if you bought a vinyl. I actually have mine right here on my desk because I got to do a video for it.
Nice. Because I
But yeah,
remember
we have.
seeing Sean do it through some vinyl
Yeah.
showings.
Yeah, like you, I collect records. I like giving back to the metal community by buying records from bands. I'm just going to say this is the last thing I'll say. The coolest thing you can do is buy the music of bands that you like. You don't just listen to it on Spotify and think you're contributing to the band's pockets and helping them, with their careers and keeping them making music. You have to actually support, go to shows, buy merch, buy an album, go the extra distance, and remember that it's not made in a factory. So yeah, give our new album a spin. There's a lot of amazing guitar solos and guests on it, so give it a shot.
Yeah. So thank you, Jesse. It's just any final words you want to say to the viewers that are watching this to close this out?
Oh, it's my pleasure to be here, dude. Thanks for having me. Thanks for working with the schedule, and I'm gonna definitely go back and look at some of your older episodes. I'm excited to check out your 200 plus episodes over time. Yeah, you can find me on social media if you want. If you want to learn more about the orchestrations in particular that I've done, or any of the synth work that I've done on any of the tracks, you can find those on YouTube by searching Daath orchestration walkthrough. And yeah, keep in touch. I'm always there if you want to shoot me a message and ask me questions about our record.
Awesome. So everybody, Jesse Zuretti from Daath and Binary Code, and we'll see you next time.